In the suffocating blackness beneath a forgotten plantation, where the earth itself seemed to weep with the weight of unspeakable sins, a soldier's lantern pierced the void, revealing skeletal children, their eyes hollow as damned souls, cowering from the light like creatures forsaken by God. What divine retribution awaited the man who locked them away, twisting innocence into a nightmare of control? This is the chilling genesis of a horror that echoes through eternity. The winter winds of 1862 howled through the Cumberland River Valley like the cries of restless spirits, carrying the bitter chill of war and abandonment. As Union forces swept into Davidson County, Tennessee, under the iron grip of occupation, they claimed the forsaken lands of the Confederacy, estates stripped bare, their grandeur reduced to echoes of hurried flight. Soldiers, weary from the march, rifled through shattered windows and splintered doors, cataloging the remnants of lives interrupted, overturned chairs splintered like broken promises, hearths cold as forgotten prayers, and the acrid scent of burned ledgers mingling with the damp rot of neglect. It was a ritual of conquest, transforming opulent homes into makeshift fortresses of blue-coated resolve, barracks where the clatter of rifles replaced the murmur of southern hospitality, hospitals where the groans of the wounded drowned out the ghosts of ballroom laughter. But amid this chaos of reclamation, the Harwell estate loomed apart, a sentinel of unnatural stillness 17 miles southeast of Nashville, nestled in the valley's shadowed embrace. The three-story manor, with its weathered brick facade etched by creeping ivy and rain-streaked columns standing like silent judges, appeared not ravaged by war, but suspended in a moment of eerie repose. As if the inhabitants had stepped away for a breath, intending to return before the tea cooled. Breakfast plates, encrusted with the moldy remnants of uneaten meals, sat poised on a lace-draped table in the dining hall, forks frozen mid-air in their descent. A leather-bound journal sprawled open on the mahogany desk in the study, its inkwell tipped, a final sentence trailing into oblivion like a soul's unfinished confession: the protocol must adapt to the variables of resistance. Wardrobes yawned wide, revealing silks and linens hanging limp, untouched by looting hands. The library's shelves groaned under volumes of agricultural tomes and scientific treatises, their spines uncracked since the last feverish reading. And in the grand entrance hall, a grandfather clock towered immutable, its hands arrested at 3:47, the pendulum's swing halted as if time itself had recoiled in horror. Captain William Morrison, a battle-hardened officer from the 3rd Ohio Infantry, led the vanguard into this spectral domain. His boots echoed on the polished oak floors, each step a profane intrusion into the silence. Morrison, with his stern jaw set beneath a mustache dusted by frost, had seen the carnage of Shiloh's prelude, bodies twisted in mud, the metallic tang of blood thick in the air, but this place unnerved him in a way no battlefield could. His initial dispatch, etched in hasty script and preserved amid the yellowed stacks of the National Archives, spoke of an eerie tranquility, as though the estate awaited its master's return with bated breath. He noted the opulence: crystal chandeliers dangling like frozen tears, Persian rugs muffling footsteps with their faded glory, and an air heavy with the scent of aged wood and lingering pipe tobacco. Yet beneath it all lingered an intangible malaise, a spiritual void that whispered of sins unconfessed, of divine eyes averted in judgment. For 3 days, Morrison's men claimed the manor as their bastion, their laughter and coarse jests clashing against the walls like ill-fitting armor. They slumbered in feather beds still imprinted with the warmth of absent bodies, kindled fires in hearths that had known only the crackle of privilege, and pored over maps in the study, their cigar smoke curling like incense in a desecrated temple. The estate's grounds stretched outward in wintry desolation, barren fields cloaked in frost, skeletal orchards reaching toward a leaden sky, and the Cumberland River murmuring nearby, its waters dark as the secrets they might carry. Scouts ventured forth, mapping Confederate remnants, while the men foraged for sustenance amid the outbuildings, barns sagging under snow-laden roofs, smokehouses empty save for the ghosts of cured hams. It was on the 4th day, February 19, 1862, that the veil of normalcy tore asunder. Private James Ketchum, a lanky youth from Cleveland with calloused hands and a face etched by farm boy innocence, descended into the root cellar in search of provisions. The cellar yawned beneath the manor like a crypt, its stone walls slick with condensation, the air thick with the earthy musk of stored roots and the faint rot of forgotten harvests. Dimensions sprawled 40 feet by 30, the packed earth floor crunching underfoot, shelves lining the perimeter burdened with empty canning jars glinting in the dim lantern light, shattered pottery scattering like relics of a shattered life, and burlap sacks slumped like weary sentinels. Ketchum, his breath fogging in the chill, heaved the sacks aside, muscles straining against the coarse fabric, hoping for the knobby promise of potatoes or turnips. But as his boot struck a corner, the floor betrayed a hollow thud, a resonant echo that reverberated through his bones like a summons from the underworld. Curiosity piqued, he summoned comrades, their lanterns casting jittery shadows that danced like demons on the walls. Together, they cleared the debris, sacks tumbling in dusty cascades, pottery shards crunching under heels. Revealed beneath was a wooden hatch, 3 feet square, its surface scarred by time, an iron ring handle oxidized to a reddish patina. A heavy sliding bolt, rusted yet unyielding, barred its secrets. With a grating scrape that echoed like a coffin lid protesting, Ketchum drew the bolt free. He gripped the ring, muscles taut, and lifted. The hatch creaked open on protesting hinges, unleashing a miasma that assaulted the senses, a fetid torrent of human excrement, decaying flesh, an air stagnant as a sealed tomb, trapped for months in subterranean exile. The stench clawed at throats, a visceral assault that bent Ketchum double, gagging, the hatch slipping from his grasp to slam shut with a thud that shook the shelves. One soldier retched violently, the acrid bile splattering the earth, another staggered back, face paling to the hue of the moon. Captain Morrison arrived swiftly, his uniform crisp against the gloom, brow furrowed in command. "Lamps," he barked, voice steady though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Peering into the yawning void, he called down, his words swallowed by silence, an abyss that offered no reply. The ladder, wooden rungs worn smooth by unseen use, descended into impenetrable darkness. Reluctance etched Ketchum's features, but duty propelled him downward, lantern clutched like a talisman against the unknown. What awaited in that bedrock-hewn chamber would scar his soul, a vision that haunted his nights until his dying breath in 1897, recounted in trembling whispers to grandchildren who could scarcely comprehend. The room measured 20 by 30 feet, ceiling brushing his scalp, air viscous and foul, clinging to skin like a shroud. The lantern's flame flickered, casting elongated shadows that writhed like tormented spirits. Crude pallets lined the walls, straw-stuffed sacks on splintered wood, stained with the residues of despair. Waste buckets overflowed in a corner, their contents a testament to prolonged captivity. An overturned barrel, once a vessel for water, lay splintered, its contents long evaporated into the damp. And then, the children, 8 spectral figures huddled in the farthest recess, emaciated frames cloaked in rags that hung like funeral shrouds, skin pallid and lesion-riddled, hair matted into tangles that spoke of neglect's cruel hand. They shielded eyes accustomed to eternal night from the intrusive glow, bodies trembling with the fragility of autumn leaves. Scars marred their flesh, bones knit crooked from untreated fractures, wounds festered into puckered reminders of pain unheeded. Ketchum's voice, hoarse with shock, called to them, no response, only vacant stares, eyes reflecting the lamplight like feral creatures ensnared in a hunter's beam. "I reckon them ghosts at first," Ketchum later testified before a military inquisitor, his voice cracking like dry timber, risen from the grave, animated by some unholy force. "They stirred not, save to recoil from the flame. No cries, no pleas, just that endless, silent vigil." An elder girl rocked rhythmically, lips parting in silent incantations, perhaps prayers to a god who seemed deaf. A boy of 8 or 9 scratched at the stone wall, fingernails worn to bloody nubs, a Sisyphean ritual devoid of purpose, echoing the futility of their existence. Ascending the ladder, Ketchum's report spilled forth in gasps, face ashen as fresh linen. Morrison descended himself, emerging after an eternal quarter-hour, complexion drained, eyes shadowed by the weight of witnessed abomination. "Fetch the surgeon," he commanded, voice a gravelly whisper that brooked no delay. Coaxing the children from their earthen prison spanned 3 agonizing hours. They flinched from the soldier's outstretched hands, terror etched in every quiver, as if the light above was a greater torment than the darkness below. Blinded by the sun's unforgiving glare, they stumbled into the Manor's parlor, where velvet curtains filtered the day into merciful dimness. Dr. Albert Hayes, a bespectacled healer hardened by field amputations, examined them with clinical detachment that soon crumbled into horrified empathy. His report, dated February 21, 1862, submitted to the provost marshal in Nashville and later buried in bureaucratic oblivion, catalogued the wreckage: 8 souls, ages ostensibly 12 to 16, though malnutrition had stunted them like saplings denied the sun, bodies 40 to 60% underweight, ribs protruding like accusations beneath taut skin. Rickets, twisted limbs, a curse of vitamin deprivation in sunless depths. Dermatitis bloomed in angry rashes, fungal infections gnawed at flesh. Discoloration mottled like bruises from divine wrath. Teeth rotted and inflamed gums, breaths ragged with respiratory afflictions born of perpetual damp. Injuries layered like chapters in a book of suffering, fresh gashes weeping pus, old fractures healed in grotesque angles. But the psyche bore the deepest scars: mutism, sealing lips, catatonia, freezing forms, dissociation, glazing eyes. 2 required crutches to shuffle, 3 uttered only guttural fragments, all recoiled from stimuli, flinching at bootfalls like thunderclaps of judgment, cowering from gestures as if expecting the lash of retribution. Venturing into the chambers himself, Hayes uncovered layers of horror akin to descending into hell's antechambers. Narrow passages snaked to adjunct rooms, one with 12 pallets in regimented rows, straw-thin as the veil between life and death, another a crude latrine, buckets brimming with filth, a drain hole clogged with despair, a makeshift basin crusted with scum. The third, a claustrophobic 8-foot square, housed a chair and desk, slits carved at eye level like Judas windows, permitting unseen surveillance, a voyeur's perch for a god playing at creation. On the desk lay a leather journal, entries scripted with meticulous precision, chronicling a controlled development protocol commencing February 12, 1856. Dates marched like soldiers, observations on behavioral responses, notations on environmental manipulations, cold calculus of human engineering. And in the sleeping chamber, 2 bodies, children reduced to husks, decomposition's advance halted in the cool earth, deaths estimated within 3 months prior, emaciated frames suggesting starvation's slow embrace or illness unchecked, blanketed thinly as if in mocking piety. Morrison, soul stirred by this affront to heaven, sealed the site with guards, their bayonets glinting like angelic swords. He impounded documents, journals dense with damning prose, ledgers tallying human costs as commodities, correspondence hinting at complicit networks. The survivors were ferried to a contraband camp, havens for the emancipated, where Hayes tended their wounds under canvas skies, administering broths laced with hope, poultices against infection, and words of comfort against the night terrors that plagued them. An urgent missive winged to Nashville superiors, pleading for inquiry. What ensued was a veil of secrecy, investigations muffled, testimonies sworn to silence, files entombed in classified vaults. Official ledgers whispered only of irregularities in enslaved management, deeming the truth too incendiary for a nation fractured by war, lest it ignite moral conflagrations. Yet fragments endured: scattered letters, marginalia in dusty tomes, a rediscovered medical shard, veterans' twilight confessions in the 1890s, piecing a mosaic of monstrosity. This is the unvarnished revelation, the saga of Edmund Harwell, a man who fancied himself a demiurge, wielding science as a scalpel against the soul. And of 12 children, ensnared in shadows so profound that redemption seemed a distant myth, their suffering a testament to sin's enduring grip, divine justice's patient wait. Edmund Harwell entered the world not as a monster, but as clay molded by indifferent hands into something devoid of warmth. Born in 1814 amid Charleston's humid sprawl, where Spanish moss draped oaks like mourning veils and the harbor's brine carried whispers of distant chains, he was the sole progeny of Marcus Harwell, a schoolmaster whose academy catered to the offspring of middling merchants. Marcus, a figure of austere rigidity, his face lined like cracked parchment, prized intellect as the sole currency of worth. Greek conjugations before Edmund's 8th birthday, Euclidean proofs by 10, affection doled in sparse nods of approval, failure a chasm of disapproval deeper than any whip's sting. Sarah Harwell, Edmund's mother, succumbed to fever when he was 6, her memory excised like a diseased limb, portraits burned, belongings banished, her name unspoken. From this, Edmund gleaned that emotion was frailty, loss of variable to be isolated and neutralized. By 14, he outpaced peers, Marcus grooming him for academia with drills in natural philosophy, but a shadow lurked, Edmund's pursuit of knowledge bent toward dominion, not enlightenment. At 15, Marcus unearthed Edmund's clandestine experiments, stray animals subjected not to sadistic whims, but systematic conditioning, cats conditioned through mazes of reward and deprivation, dogs molded by stimuli into paragons of obedience. Notebooks brimmed with data, response times, behavioral thresholds, optimization curves. Marcus, rather than condemn, critiqued methodology, imparting discretion as the veil for inquiry. Thus, evil's seed was nurtured, not uprooted, science sanctified as shield against moral scrutiny. Enrolling at East Tennessee University at 17, Edmund immersed in agricultural science, a field blooming amid the 1830s Enlightenment, crop rotations supplanting exhaustion, soil chemistry unlocking yields. He devoured texts on botany, engineering, husbandry, but professors whispered of his chill, viewing life as mechanisms, plants as factories, animals as automata, humans implied extensions. His 1836 thesis, Environmental Determinism and Agricultural Production, eliminating variables for yield maximization, dazzled with precision, yet chilled with its reductionist gaze, life stripped to inputs and outputs, souls absent from the equation. Graduating at 22, honors-clad but friendless, Edmund shunned revelry for rigor. Resources eluded until 1841, when in Knoxville's genteel circles, he encountered Louisa Kenton, 20, heiress to a faltering tobacco empire. Her father, Charles, burdened by debt in decline, owned a 600-acre Davidson County tract, mortgaged, depleted. Edmund courted with calculated allure, discourses on scientific farming, projections of prosperity, a union pitched as investment. Louisa, versed in sonnets but naive to ledgers, saw stability. They wed in 1842, the property deeded as dowry, with 43 enslaved souls as chattel. At 28, Harwell ascended as plantation lord, inheriting ruin, fields barren as sin hearts, structures crumbling like false idols, workforce gaunt and spirit broken. He approached as experiment, ledgers chronicling minutiae, soil pH, weather logs, yield matrices. Enslaved lives catalogued with clinical detachment, anthropometrics, aptitudes, temperaments, files stacking like judgments at heaven's gate. Implementing specialization, cohorts for crops, crafts, care. Then, the insidious, performance incentives, marginal rations for quotas met, respites as lures. Not mercy, but Pavlovian engineering, yielding 40% surges by 1845, acclaim swelling. Harwell lectured, published, ascended socially, yet Louisa sensed the void, separate chambers, dialogues utilitarian, affection algorithmic. Concealed was his creed, all as optimizable systems, inklings of a darker query, could humanity be engineered from cradle? A 1847 conference ignited obsession, livestock bred via environments, temperaments forged in youth. Extrapolating to humans, he delved into pedagogy, psychology, environmental determinism as gospel. By 1848, 19 children under 12 dotted the quarters, nurtured in communal bonds. Harwell deemed it chaos, potential squandered. Plans coalesced, a juvenile training facility. In 1849, repurposing a barn into barracks, he decreed separation at 6, framed as enlightenment, met with parental anguish, overridden by ownership's tyranny. 17 children relocated in May, the first step into an abyss where innocence met the forge of a false god, divine retribution brewing in the silence. Pause, ambient sound of echoing footsteps fading into darkness, building suspense for the next revelation. But this was merely the prelude. The true descent into depravity awaited, where control twisted into captivity, and the underground chambers became tombs for the living, haunted by themes of sin's inheritance, justice's inexorable march, and the faint hope of redemption's light piercing the veil. The veil of progress masked a descent into depravity on the Harwell estate, where the air hung heavy with the scent of turned earth and blooming cotton, and the Cumberland's murmur carried undertones of unrest like a biblical flood's prelude. Edmund Harwell, a figure of calculated precision, his frame lean and unyielding as the iron tools he wielded, extended his grip beyond the fields into the fragile psyches of the young. Through shadowed intermediaries, whispers in Knoxville taverns, discreet letters sealed with wax bearing no crest, he secured William Crane, a tutor gone from scholarly pursuits and desperate for coin. Crane, with his ink-stained fingers and eyes averted from moral quandaries, arrived to impart literacy and arithmetic to enslaved children, blind to the web of conditioning that ensnared them. Edmund's regime unfolded with the inexorable rhythm of a grandfather clock's tick, each day a scripted verse in his gospel of control. Dawn pierced the dormitory's thin shutters, rousing the children with a bell's toll, cold and metallic, echoing like judgment's call. Morning exercises stretched small limbs under the graying sky, breaths fogging in the crisp air, muscles aching as they mimicked drills designed not for health, but obedience. Lessons followed in a converted barn, its walls rough-hewn and splintered, the scent of hay mingling with chalk dust. Crane's voice droned equations and letters, while Edmund observed from shadows, noting flinches and compliances in leather-bound tomes. Afternoons dissolved into labor scaled to tender ages, tiny hands weeding rows where thorns drew blood like stigmata, or tending livestock whose lowing seemed a lament for lost freedoms. Evenings brought meager meals, cornbread crumbling like dry earth, salted pork slick with grease, eaten in silence under flickering lantern light. Then came the socialization periods, a euphemism for Edmund's vigilant gaze. Children clustered on straw mats, their interactions dissected like specimens under a lens, group dynamics manipulated to forge chains of compliance, whispers of friendship curtailed if they bred defiance. To the outside world, glimpses filtered through neighboring parlors where tea steamed in porcelain cups and gossip flowed like sweet molasses. Harwell's innovative approach, investing in the enslaved youth's education, a beacon of enlightened mastery amid the South's feudal shadows. Planters in starched collars nodded approval at agricultural gatherings, their pipes puffing aromatic tobacco, praising his forward vision as if it were a divine mandate to tame the wilds of human potential. Yet beneath this facade lurked a spiritual rot, a perversion of stewardship where knowledge served not to liberate, but to bind, echoing the serpent's whisper in Eden, promising godlike dominion through forbidden fruit. The education Crane dispensed was no light of wisdom, it was a forge for malleable minds, scriptures twisted to preach submission, mathematics bent to quantify worth in yields and obedience. Edmund's notes proliferated, pages filled with clinical script, responses to authority charted like weather patterns, pressures tested until spirits bent without breaking, incentives dangled like Judas silver, extra rations for compliance, isolation for resistance. Punishments were calibrated shadows, a skipped meal evoking famine's biblical curse, confinement mirroring Jonah's whale-bound repentance. Over 3 years, from 1849's hesitant beginnings to 1852's refined tyranny, Edmund honed his craft, convinced that childhood's clay could be sculpted into flawless vessels, free from the chaos of free will. His theory crystallized, behavioral plasticity peaked in youth, a sacred window for imprinting traits, yet traditional rearing, laden with parental bonds like Eve's tempted gaze, pure whims like Cain's envy, introduced sins of variability. Purity demanded excision, a sterile Eden engineered from isolation, where divine randomness yielded to man's hubris. By 1852, whispers of radicalism stirred in Edmund's soul, journals swelling with diagrams of isolation's architecture, plans veiled even from his own workforce, lest their consciences ignite like dry tinder under summer sun. The experiment's core, total severance from the world's corrupting touch, a subterranean sanctuary or sepulchre where light, sound, and sustenance bowed to his command. Early 1853 saw blueprints unfurl on his desk, candle wax dripping like tears unshed, as he pondered requirements, isolation absolute as a hermit's vow, concealment deep as buried talents in parable, control over every sensory thread, temperature steady as hell's inferno, light rationed like manna from heaven. Subterranean became salvation, Earth's embrace offered thermal constancy, acoustic burial, visual void perfect for his unholy genesis. May 1853 brought covert commissions, a mason from Murfreesboro, his tools clinking like chains, hired under guise of cold storage expansion for bountiful harvests. The man, taciturn and scarred from bedrock battles, queried little, accepting coin for silence. 7 months of toil ensued, enslaved laborers, backs bent under whip's shadow, sweat mingling with stone dust, rotating in shifts to fragment knowledge, hauling rubble in creaking carts, mortar mixing in troughs redolent of lime's bite. Edmund oversaw with hawkish eyes, revealing fragments, a wall here, a passage there, ensuring no soul grasped the labyrinth's full sin. December 1853 unveiled the abyss, 15 feet into Tennessee's unyielding bedrock, chambers hewn with pickaxe scars, air thick with mineral tang. The main vault spanned 20 by 30 feet, ceiling 8 feet, oppressive as lowered heaven's oil lamps suspended, their flames manipulable via ropes snaking upward, Edmund's hand the unseen deity dimming or igniting. Ventilation shafts, slender as confessionals, angle through rock to wooded outlets 50 yards distant, whispers of wind their only mercy, too narrow for escape stream. Adjoining, sleeping quarters, 15 by 20, 12 pallets aligned like tombs, wooden frames cradling straw that prickled like thorns of crown, shelves for rags masquerading as garb. Sanitation's grim alcove, 10 feet square, buckets reeking of humanity's fall, a drain plunging into natural fissures like sins swallowed by abyss, a barrel for ablutions whose water grew stagnant as forgotten covenants. Most damning, the observation cell, 8 feet confined, access solely from above, slits peering like judgmental eyes, a desk for chronicling souls unraveling, unseen as God's wrath brewing. Furnishings completed the cage, stools splintering under weight, a table scarred by absent feasts, cabinets echoing emptiness. A pulley groan supplies downward, baskets of bread and broth descending like dubious grace. A speaking tube channeled commands, voice disembodied as prophetic thunder. All engineered for dominion, Edmund's philosophy incarnate, where free will withered in controlled void, echoing Babel's confusion but inverted, unity enforced through isolation. January 1854 saw completion, books curated on shelves, Bibles stripped to obedience verses, primers purged of rebellion's spark, no spark of independent flame. Yet the chambers yawned empty for 2 years, Edmund biding like a spider in Webb's center, refining plantation rhythms, observing dormitory dynamics, awaiting alignment of stars or fates. March 1855 shattered stasis. Louisa's labor, her form swollen and frail, commenced under storm clouds pregnant with omen. At 34, she endured the crucible, Dr. Nathan Pierce's hands steady but shadowed by era's medical limits. Evening groans escalated through night, dawn revealing breach's curse, child twisted as original sin. Forceps cruel grasp birthed a stillborn son at 11:40 a.m. on the 9th, blue and silent as drowned hope. Hemorrhage claimed Louisa 2 hours hence, her blood-staining linens like sacrificial altars. Edmund's facade cracked not with tears, but clinical detachment, visitors noted eyes dry as parchment, voice even as leveled fields, discourse framing loss as scientific shortfall, regrettable inefficiency, methodology must evolve. Dr. Pierce shuddered at the chill, minister preached suppressed sorrow, neighbors murmured of inherent strangeness amplified by grief's forge. Truth veiled, Louisa was component, not companion, her demise irritated order, not rent heart. Yet it catalyzed radicalism, journals from March 24 railing against nature's chaos, birth's lottery, death's whim, proclaiming intelligence's mandate to impose divine order, farmers' folly and wild growth mirroring planters in random rearing. Correspondence bloomed with fringe minds, phrenologists mapping skulls as behavioral maps, proto-psychologists delving deprivation's depths. Autumn 1855 solidified delusions, behavior environmentally forged, traditional environs chaotic as Sodom streets, purity demanding total control, morally imperative as scientific crusade. Planning activated chambers, subjects selected October-December, Edmund haunting sessions like a specter, files splayed like judgment scrolls. Criteria, ages 6 to 10, pliable yet resilient, hale bodies unmarred by chronic plagues, temperaments tractable as lambs to slaughter, bonds minimal, orphans, cell severed, deliberately fractured families, minimizing outcries echo. January 1856 yielded 12, recent acquisitions, 3 boys, 2 girls, trauma fresh from Virginia-Kentucky auctions, rootless as wandering Israelites, orphans a sibling pair, mother feverfelled, father distant under schedule's yoke, communally reared, 4 birthed on estate, maternal ties severed at weaning per protocol's cold cradle, the isolated to Dinah, 9, family sold southward in orchestrated purge, grief her sole companion. Depersonalized as subjects 1 to 12, journals stripped names like souls bared. February 10 stocked the void, provisions hoarded, beans gritty as penance, cornmeal fine as dust of earth, pork salted against decay, mechanisms tested, air shafts sighing approval. Dawn, February 12, dormitory stirred, crane informed of transfers, nodding complicity. Children summoned, belongings clutched like talismans, rags, trinkets of lost worlds. Edmund's assurance, advanced training, new quarters, tones soothing as serpent's coil. Procession crossed frost-kissed grounds, adults averting eyes, powers shadow-lone. Root cellar descent, lanterns flickering shadows like dancing demons, hatch unveiled amid burlap's shroud. Fear bloomed, eyes wide as saucers, whimpers rising. Oldest, Marcus, subject 1, commanded downward, hesitation met with steel-edged threat. One by one, they plunged, tears streaking faces, cries muffled by earth's embrace. 2 hours indoctrination, pallets assigned like fates decreed, sanitation rituals recited as commandments, pulley demonstrated as manna's modern mimic, rules etched in air obey, order, silence, no ascents temptation. Children wept, Edmund ignored, ascending to seal hatch, bolts scrape a thunderclap of finality. Study bound, journal opened, controlled development protocol, day 1 observations clinical as autopsy notes, evil unrecognized in mirror of self-deception. Below, lamps quenched remotely, darkness absolute as pre-creation void, screams piercing silence, cries weaving a tapestry of terror, the first threads in a shroud of suffering where innocence met engineered damnation, divine retribution's clock ticking unseen. The abyss claimed its first fragile hold on the youngest soul, subject 12, a 6-year-old girl named Ada, her tiny frame trembling like a leaf in autumn's gale, her voice a thin reed breaking against the stone. She called for her brother, over and over, the words fracturing into whimpers until her throat wrought into silence, the echo lingering like a ghost's lament in the stale, suffocating air. The children huddled in clusters, small hands seeking warmth in the absolute void, disoriented by walls slick with condensation that gleamed coldly under non-existent light, the metallic tang of fear mingling with the earthy musk of their prison. Time dissolved into an eternal now, a biblical wilderness of confusion and terror, where hours stretched like the 40 years of Israelite wandering, no manna from heaven, only the gnawing uncertainty of why God had forsaken them. When Edmund finally intervened, though the captives, blind to the world's rhythms, knew not the dawn's arrival, the hatch creaked open above, spilling light like molten judgment from on high. The beam-assaulted eyes accustomed to oblivion, children shielding faces with ragged sleeves, cries erupting in agony as if the radiance were brimstone's burn. Edmund's voice descended, toneless and authoritative as a prophet's decree. Morning commences. Your training initiates. He manipulated pulleys with mechanical detachment, lowering lamps that flickered to life, casting elongated shadows that danced like demons on the uneven rock. Then came the basket, swaying on its rope like a dubious offering, cornmeal mush congealed in a communal pot, water in a dented pail, 12 wooden spoons scarred from prior use. Eat in order, his command echoed from unseen heights. Divide equally. Return the vessel in 30 minutes. Hunger, a serpent coiling in empty bellies, overrode disarray. They scrambled, portions slopped messily onto palms, older ones quelling squabbles with hushed urgings, the mush's bland grit sticking to teeth like the dust of mortality. Finished, they hoisted the basket skyward. Edmund, peering from his hidden perch, noted in his journal with quills scratch, cooperation nascent, hierarchies budding amid resource scarcity, cold calculus reducing human bonds to variables in Sin's equation. Thus began the day's unholy liturgy, Edmund's voice materializing through the speaking tube, a serpentine pipe embedded in the wall, omnipresent as God's whisper in Eden yet devoid of grace. Commence education, it intoned, directionless and chilling. Locate the texts on shelves. Elders read aloud, Moral Lessons for Youth, page 1. Panic flickered, eyes darting to pinpoint the source, hearts pounding like sacrificial drums. Marcus, Subject 1, 10 years etched in wary caution, fumbled the volume, its leather binding cracked like parched earth, voice quavering as he recited parables twisted to preach submission, the words hanging heavy in the air like incense in a profane temple. This pattern etched itself into their existence, Edmund the unseen puppeteer, strings of light, sustenance, and command pulling from above. No autonomy, no veil of privacy, every breath monitored, every whisper potentially judged. The psychological scourge descended swiftly, a plague of the spirit mirroring Egypt's afflictions, well-adjusted dormitory dwellers fracturing into withdrawal's silence, aggression snarls, dissociation's vacant stares. Younger ones wept rivers, tears tracing salty paths on grimy cheeks, elders feigned strength, their own terror a hidden thorn in the side, like Christ's crown. By day 3, Subject 5, Joseph, 8, with curls matted and eyes once bright rebelled in stillness, refusing mush, curled on his pallet like a forsaken lamb. Edmund observed, documenting, resistance via deprivation, autonomy's futile grasp. His counter, addressing the collective through the tube, voice flat as leveled ground. Subject 5 opts out. His share vanishes, unreal located. All rations diminish. Until compliance. Manipulation's venom spread, turning kin against kin, begging whispers escalating to please, Joseph's frame weakening under peer pressure's yoke, resuming intake by day 5. Edmund noted triumph, group leverage quells defiance, a tactic echoing Judas's betrayal for collective peace. Week's end instilled the core heresy, utter powerlessness, a spiritual void where free will withered, obedience the sole sacrament, release a distant mirage like the promised land glimpsed but unattained. Yet Edmund's routine ground on, a mechanical mill crushing souls. Awakening came at his whim, hatch parting, call descending, lamps igniting like false dawns. Breakfast, mush sparse, molasses rare as mercy, portions calibrated for survival's edge, never satiety's embrace. Morning indoctrination, 2 hours reciting texts, Bibles stripped to obedience verses, hierarchies exalted as divine order, Edmund interrupting via tube, queries probing like inquisitors' probes. Exercise followed, calisthenics in confinement, jumps echoing off stone, stretches straining sinews, runs in place pounding earth like penitent's flagellation. Not benevolence, but data harvest, watch timing endurance, noting falters as weaknesses in creation's clay. Midday fare, beans gritty, pork salted sparingly, cornbread crumbling eaten cross-legged on cold floor, shadows lengthening like doubts. Afternoons, skills veiled as torment, sorting lowered objects, stones, rags, in sequences, puzzles under duress, obedience tested amid stress's forge. Evenings, further readings or lectures booming disembodied, sermons on role fulfillment, pseudoscience cloaking control as progress. Supper mirrored dawn's meager, then extinction, lights quenched, plunging into blackness profound as the grave, until cycles rebirth. Monotony's blade cut deepest, a Sisyphean loop under invisible tyranny, existence distilled to compliance's echo. Yet variations pierce like thorns, prolonged nights, darkness extending to 14 hours, journals noting anxieties bloom upon illumination agitation, queries on time's passage, bodies twitching like possessed vessels. Sleep disruptions, awakenings multiple, fatigue weaponized, compliance crumbling under weariness's weight. Ration reductions, thresholds probed, bodies wasting like famine's curse. Social crucibles, unequal allotments sparking conflicts, competitions forging hierarchies, bonds tested as Cain and Abel's rift. Edmund chronicled detached, day 23, subject 3's cut rations, peers share, bonds persisting, isolate further. Day 31, 16-hour void temporal disorientation evident, data rich. Day 47, unequal distribution, cohesion fractures, dominance emerges as foretold. His prose mirrored soul's chill, children equated to crops, suffering quantified sans empathy, a man adrift from humanity's shore, blind to his fall from grace. Yet resilience flickered, human spirit's ember in hell's draft, adaptations born of necessity. Marcus ascended leader, 10-year authority mediating, enforcing order to avert worse wrath, a reluctant Moses guiding flock. Benjamin and Sarah flanked, secondary shepherds corralling young Ada clinging to Sarah like Ruth to Naomi, tears confided in sisterly arms. Rituals emerged, darkness banished by handheld circles, stories spun, folktales of freedom, scriptures of deliverance, voices weaving light through touch. Duties divided, water wardens, sanitation keepers, pallet arrangers, micro-autonomies preserving sanity's thread. Resistance subtle, outward compliance, inward defiance rules bent in shadows, bonds nurtured against observation's eye. But toll mounted, 6 months morphed innocence, bodies emaciated, growth halted like cursed figs, skin sallow from sun's exile, teeth decaying, hair thinning as Samson's shorn locks. Psyches scarred deeper, withdrawals to wall stairs, obsessions rocking like endless prayers, dissociations fleeing torment's grip. Illness struck June 1856, subject 7, Thomas, 7, fevered cough rattling chambers like death's rattle. Peers pleaded upward, Edmund lowered teas and tonics, observing sans intervention, pneumonia's grip tightening in damp's cradle, malnutrition's ally. Children nursed, comforts offered, rations shared, Benjamin vigilant as guardian angel. Thomas perished June 18, dawn's hush, Benjamin's cry ascending, he's gone. Edmund, expiration at 0630, environmental complication, remove evening to mitigate impact. Descent that night, body borne aloft, children witnessing in grief's paralysis, buried unmarked in wood shroud, lie spun of transfer. Hope shattered, tomb realized, compliance no salvation, death's spectre real as Lazarus's weight. Edmund's psyche unraveled, script erratic, entries defensive, not methodology's flaw, variables inevitable, adjust. Bonds deemed confounders, observation slits betrayed by stares, awareness tainting purity. Failure loomed, data mere suffering's log, reframed as tweaks, denial's veil. Interactions minimized, sustenance mechanical, waste hauled when stench ascended like accusing smoke. Drink deepened, appearance haggard, social withdrawal chalked to widow's grief, whispers of madness unheeding truth. September 1856, subject 9, Ruth, 8, fell climbing shelves, gash bleeding crimson on pottery's edge. Please met with bandages, alcohol sting, infection bloomed in filth's garden, swelling, fever, delirium, death September 4th the journal, sepsis, note risks, consider truncation, hollow musing, inaction sin. Body vanished, 10 endured. Autumn 1856 to 1857, monotony's grind, entries sparse, compliant, adapting, health declining, psyches varied. Trauma profound, darkness cycles etching eternal night, malnutrition stunting like blighted vines, development denied, damage irreversible, souls bearing Cain's mark, awaiting justice's dawn. As the seasons bled into one another in the subterranean limbo of the Harwell estate, where the Cumberland's distant roar mocked the silence of captivity, the 10 remaining children, once vibrant sparks of life, withered under the relentless grind of isolation's curse. Their world, a bedrock vault damp with the seep of forgotten rains, reeked of mildew and despair, the air thick as a shroud woven from sins unconfessed. Some descended into what healers of later eras would name severe melancholy, a biblical affliction of the spirit akin to Job's torment, lying motionless on straw pallets that prickled like crowns of thorns. eyes staring into the void as if communing with shadows, words emerging only in fractured whispers when survival demanded. Others bore the scars of perpetual vigilance, bodies jolting at the faintest scrape of stone or drip of condensation, hearts racing like hunted prey, panic surging when lamps extinguished, plunging them into darkness profound as the pit from which no Lazarus returned. Subject 12, little Ada, now 7, her once bright eyes dulled to the hue of faded ash, ceased speech altogether, a mutism born of trauma's iron grip, communicating through gestures frail as autumn leaves, grunts echoing like primal pleas to a deaf deity. Dina, subject 8, the 9-year-old whose family Edmund had callously auctioned away like chattel in a marketplace of souls, clung to rituals as anchors against madness, hands scrubbed raw in scant water rations, fingers tracing invisible patterns on the cold floor, stones arranged in meticulous geometries as if ordering chaos could summon redemption's light. Edmund chronicled these aberrations with quill's indifferent scratch, viewing them not as cries of fractured psyches but as data points in his ledger of control, children reduced to specimens, their anguish mere footnotes in a treatise defying divine creation, blind to the spiritual rot festering in his own heart. Above, the plantation pulsed with deceptive normalcy, fields swaying under summer suns that bronzed the enslaved laborers' backs, the scent of blooming tobacco mingling with sweat and soil, barns echoing with the lowing of cattle and the rhythmic chop of hoes. Workers tended crops with bowed heads, mended fences under the overseer's watchful gaze, harvested yields that fattened Edmund's coffers, life's cycle unbroken for all save the vanished 10, whose absence hung like a spectral fog over the quarters. Whispers circulated in hushed tones around evening fires, flames crackling like judgmental tongues, 12 children spirited away, Edmund's demeanor unraveling like frayed rope, eyes hollowed, steps erratic, nights spent in solitary vigil. On still evenings, faint sounds drifted from ventilation shafts concealed in wooded thickets, muffled voices, perhaps sobs, carried on breezes like echoes from Sheol. Yet fear-sealed lips. To accuse a master was to invite the lash or worse, chains of a system forged in original sin, where the oppressed bore witness but held no power, their silence a complicit veil over abomination, divine justice deferred in the face of earthly tyranny. As 1857 yielded to 1858's weary dawn, and 1858 to 1859's encroaching shadows, Edmund's tether to his experiment frayed, journals once brimming with meticulous entries now sparse as famine's harvest, mere notations of sustenance delivered, waste retrieved, light cycles maintained. The pretense of scientific yield crumbled, revelation's absence saved the stark truth of human fragility under duress, but cessation eluded him, a moral precipice too sheer to cross. To free them invited revelation, tongues loosened by trauma spreading rumors like wildfire through Davidson County's parlors, reputations scorched, inquiries igniting. Sale beckoned questions, their emaciated forms, haunted gazes betraying horrors no market could conceal. Extermination loomed as final recourse, yet even in depravity's depths, a remnant of conscience recoiled, labeling such an act the monster's mark he dared not claim, echoing Cain's denial amid Abel's bloodied ground. Inertia reigned, children suspended in limbo, sustenance minimal as Elijah's raven's provisions, Edmund averting gaze from the abyss of his making, soul adrift in self-deception's fog. Then, history's tempest stirred, the Union's fracture, South Carolina's defiant secession in December 1860, Tennessee's reluctant echo in June 1861, war's thunder rolling like apocalyptic seals breaking. Federal boots marched southward, Nashville's fall imminent by February 1862, Edmund, a Confederate whisperer, sensing the noose of occupation, hastened flight, assets liquidated in hurried auctions, valuables bundled in trunks redolent of cedar and secrecy, path charted to southern strongholds. Yet the 10 below posed perditions riddle immobile burdens, their release a Pandora's unleashing, maintenance impossible amid exodus. His penultimate journal scrawl, November 15, 1861, trembled with unresolved sin, the subjects constitute an irresolvable encumbrance to relocation. Resolution demands fortitude I lack, trailing into blankness, words faltering like faith before the cross. Evidence whispers of a final descent mid-November, lantern in hand casting grotesque shadows on ladders rungs, supplies lowered in abundance, barrels of water sloshing like baptismal fonts profaned, sacks of beans and cornmeal thudding like judgments fallen. Perhaps a deferral of damnation, provisions for months' survival, abandonment veiled as mercy, fate's dice cast in darkness. Or calculated cruelty rations finite, starvation's slow embrace absolving direct hand, self-delusion's bomb on a conscience corroded. Unwritten motives linger as enigmas, shrouded in spiritual ambiguity. Late November saw Edmund's departure, estate secured with bolted doors and drawn curtains, hatch fastened like a tomb seal, vanishing into war's maw. The 10, forsaken in eternal night. Supplies dwindling like sand in hourglass, clawed at survival's edge, a moisture licked from walls weep, rations portioned with desperate equity, hope flickering dim as guttering candle. Private Ketchum's hatch opening on February 19, 1862, breached nearly 6 years entombment, 5 years, 11 months of hell's facsimile. 2 more perished post-abandonment, supplies exhausted by late January, 3 weeks famine endured through willpower's miracle, bodies cannibalizing themselves like the starving in siege-scripted prophecies. Dr. Hayes's examinations, spanning days in the contraband camp's canvas tents where wood smoke curled like incense, unveiled horrors etching veterans' souls, physiques ravaged, weights halved from norms, growth arrested, adolescents appearing as eternal youths, cursed like Tithonus without dawn. Rickets warped bones into grotesque parodies, skin ghostly translucent, infections festering like unrepented sins, teeth rotted, breaths wheezing from damp's insidious grip. Psyches bore deeper wounds, a spiritual desolation defying comprehension, mutism cloaking tongues, light eliciting flinches as if from hellfire, open skies inducing agoraphobic terror, freedom's gift to poison chalice, captives adapted to chains, expecting commands for every breath, echoing slaves in Pharaoh's thrall. Catatonia claimed too, stares vacant as empty sepulchres, one self-inflicted harm, head against walls in rhythmic penance, arms bitten like flagellant's scourge, another clung to kin with panic's vice, separation evoking abandonment's primal scream. Hayes's report crescendoed with rare passion, war's wounds pale beside this systematic savagery, evil transcending cruelty's bounds, demanding retribution's sword. Yet justice faltered, Morrison's dispatch ascending chains of command, each rung recoiling in horror, only to bend under politics' weight. Union's Tennessee tenure fragile, hearts unconquered, compliance coerced, Harwell saga incendiary, victims enslaved. Legally mere property, prosecution unprecedented amid racial hierarchies. Confederate leanings risked martyrs' halo, inflaming rebellion, war's exigencies prioritized battles over inquests, testimonies tainted by trauma, credibility assailed. Verdict, suppression, files entombed, lips sealed, notations vague as management anomalies. Children absorbed into contraband camps, teeming masses, identities dissolving in war's flux, families sundered, names mangled, stories submerged. Edmund evaded pursuit, no warrants, no reckoning, a specter amid atrocities' multitude, sin unpunished like the wicked prospering in Psalm's lament. Survivors' trails fade, Chaplin's 1862 diary notes, cave-imprisoned youths, souls shrouded in perpetual night, unresponsive to gospel's light. Freedmen's Bureau 1865 memo dismisses underground captivity claims as delusion. 1883 interview with Mrs. E.H. Tale of buried years scoffed as fancy. Did they forge lives from shards, families from ashes, or succumb to wounds unseen? History's silence mocks, names erased as thoroughly as Edmund's intent, and ultimate desecration. Edmund's enshrouded, possible Atlanta clerkship 1862, roster hinting E. Harwell, Richmond death certificate 1863, typhoid at 49, matching profile, or South Carolina 1864 memoirs haunted Harwell, suicide's shadow and war's wane. Remorse? Delusion's persistence? Suffering or serenity? Echoes unanswered, divine ledger unbalanced. Evidence effaced, journals vanished, seized, perhaps incinerated in bureaucratic pyres, chambers dynamited 1880s, rubble filled by hands erasing stigma, federal or local. Reports sealed, fragments resurfacing 1934 via historian Robert Kimmel's misfiled medical shard shock birthing inquiry, yielding scant crumbs, marginalia, diary snippets, no trials. His 1937 paper, an undocumented atrocity, relegated to obscurity, copies moldering in archives, Kimmel departing 1941 unfinished. Estate transmuted, Union held till 1865, auction 1867 to failed farmer, resold 1873, Manor torched 1879, arson whispered is purgation's flame. Subdivided 1885, urbanized by 1900, Nashville's sprawl birthing Meadowbrook homes, shopping plazas, offices where Manor stood. Today, asphalt veils secrets, commuters oblivious, parking lots over graves, lattes sipped where sobs once echoed, ordinary life layering over horror's bedrock, no plaque, no memorial, land amnesiac as repentant sinners. This saga ends not in catharsis but queries thorn, Edmund's blasphemy, imprisoning 12, engineering torment as science, slaying 4, 6 by abandonment's chain, unavenged, justice's scales tipped by convenience. Survivors scarred eternally, uncompensated, unrecognized, names lost, testimonies muted, existence a footnote in oblivion's tome. Suppression intentional, authorities burying truth lest it fracture fragile peace, records purged like heretical texts, witnesses muzzled. Fragments persist, disappearances verified, chambers confirmed, 1862 discoveries disturbance etched, suppressions veil thin, but voids gape, identities, survivals, voices unheard. This limbo injustice's pinnacle, children meriting remembrance, prosecution, bomb, denied all, story a spectral whisper, historical wound unhealed. Beneath Nashville's bustle, stones endure, silent witnesses to nightmare, awaiting Eschaton's revelation. 12 descended February 1856, 8 ascended 1862, souls adrift, divine retribution's promise lingering in Earth's quiet depths.